welcome to Screentone Club. They are recording on the 6th of October 2019 for release on the 13th of October 2019. You may notice the dates sound a little bit skew-whiff compared to normal. That's because October is Hell month. And joining me in the Hell month of October, actually it's more his Hell month than mine, is Mr. Andy Hanley. How you doing, Andy?
Yes, I'm at the gates of hell currently, so everything's okay at the moment, but ask me again in a few weeks.
So, which layer of hell are you on according to Inferno?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like somewhere between the first and second, I'm guessing. Like I'm still pretty early in the hellscape. Well,
given what's going to be happening, I'm pretty sure that soon you'll be at the level of Fraud Major, if I remember that book correctly. It's wild. Like, if you read Inferno now, it's just this, like, angry Italian dude dragging everyone in local politics. It's real weird as a read, especially with, like, crazy footnotes. Regardless, Inferno is not a manga. Or is it? It
not
might
yet.
be. Yeah. It could well be before I know it. Anyway, this is Screentone Club, your manga podcast. We're on episode 35, which I know that's not really a special number, but I think it's quite a good one. I blinked and suddenly we've been doing this for over a year. Weird. We are supported by you, our lovely listeners, on patreon.com/Screentone Club. If you so wish, you can fling us $1 a month and you get bonus episodes, of which the September one is delayed and will be up as soon as possible. It will certainly be up before this episode comes out, so this is now all old news. But if you wish, you can support us on Patreon. You can suggest titles for us to read. Such as The Girl from the Other Side, which is the subject of our most recent bonus episodes. I think that was a good one. So looking forward to hearing what people think about that. Also on the Patreon bent is our shoutouts tier. Shoutouts once again to Rob Jessup, who still hasn't gotten sick of me doing this. Rob Jessup being the person who is crazy enough to do an ultra marathon. I don't even quite know what an ultra marathon involves. I presume they just do like 3 marathons back to back and then pick you off the floor at the end.
Yeah, I sort of imagine there's some kind of superhero thing where you have to save people from a burning building, but maybe I'm getting confused with Ultraman, I don't know. Or
you're getting confused with My Hero Academia, perhaps. Maybe. I don't think Rob Jessup is also known as Deku somehow, or that Jeans man. Best Jeanist? Is that it?
Yeah. That's the one, yeah.
Man, that guy. So, we're not talking about My Hero Academia, sadly. Maybe we should at some point. But we are talking about 2 series that we're reading at the moment, because we have no returning champions this week, apparently, according to our Google document we have shared. I'm pretty sure I've read some stuff, but nothing returning to talk about, unless there's anything I've missed, Andy?
No, nothing on my docket currently.
No, all I can really say is that I'm still reading Promised Neverland and still reading Chainsaw Man. Please read Chainsaw Man, although it has me scared at the moment because it's just introduced a new, interesting, cool character and has already started to make weirdly veiled threats against them. It's like, come on, Chainsaw Man. You could have a character live for 2 chapters before trying to kill them, can't you? Like, come on.
I don't know, that doesn't really sound like it's modus operandi at all, so...
Yeah, Chainsaw Man, Christ. Anyway, so moving on to our main part of the show where we have our various picks. And so my pick, if you don't mind, Andy, first, because I have all my notes right here in front of me.
Yeah, go for it.
So this was my the Elliot Page selfish pick, as perhaps usual, as if there's any other kind. And this was me picking Queen Bee, Volume 1. The series is by Shizuru Seno. It's published by Kodansha. It's incomplete at present. There are 2 volumes available in English, and I didn't know there was a second one, so I'm going to have to go buy that. And you can get it from digital bookstores. I don't believe it has a physical release yet. It might be one of these Kodansha digital firsts. So Queen Bee is the story of Mihane Kirata. I can't even read my own handwriting when I'm trying to remember people's names. Who is the spawn of a pair of delinquent parents, and she has somehow managed to acquire the most scary parts of both of their faces, and now is known as the Killer Demon, even though she's kind of a very innocent, sweet, kind of innocent and naive girl who has like a crush on the class hottie. She looks really scary to most people at first look. She's got a darker complexion, she's got tiny, tiny beady eyes, she tries way too hard at most things she tries tries her hand at, and so ends up usually with negative results because she tried way too hard or is thinking too hard about it. And so she is has the hots for Tomakun, who is the, as mentioned, class hottie. He's somewhat of a blank slate at this point in the series, apart from the fact that he's very sort of like quiet, self-withdrawn, appears to have some kind of weird hang-up about himself that you start to get some information about in this series. And the problem is, of course, that he's actually, being the class hottie, is that he attracts a lot of attention from everyone else in the class. You know, he has a group of popular friends, he attracts all the popular and hot girls, and so the series kind of devolves into Mihane's attempts to try and get into Toma's good graces, or at least like, chat to him, which frankly is where it settles on. The first chapter is very much one of those long one-shot type dealies that's about 48 pages, and after that the series does a soft reset as it actually gets syndicated and starts to go regular publication. So I kind of like this series mostly because it's a very, very goofy comedy, as well as a goofy romance comedy. Like Mihane kind of blurts out her confession to Toma right from the off, which is kind of refreshing in that they get on with it, even if it then leads to a kind of pseudo rejection. And then it brings out that old chestnut of Tomakun's friends daring and betting him to go out with her, and it kind of turns into this like odd couple style comedy where as mentioned, Mihane tries way too hard at everything and so usually comes a cropper, makes a fool of herself, pulls lots of funny good faces, and is generally a bit of a devil, or a demon, I suppose. She's also aided in this by her friend Maria, who is basically Satan. She's like the very cute friend who is the cute girl who is also the foil to everything because she is a little nightmare setting up Mihane and generally fucking things up, which makes her a very enjoyable character because she is basically the constant foil for everything. And so it's nothing special. Like, it's nothing outstanding, going to blow your mind, going to change the world of romance forever. But I just enjoy it because the main character is so innocent and guileless and kind of a doof. And also it's nice to have like a female focused, a girl focused, like girl first series like this. Like, you could quite easily gender swap the characters and it would be like every other romance series. But it's nice to have it coming from the girl's angle. And all the various different little things where, you know, Toma, by the end of the volume, has to admit that Mihane is very interesting and also, quote, powerful, which she certainly is. But that's kind of her charm, is that she is just this desperate maiden in love who is a complete doof, which is kind of why I enjoy it. There's some good comedy, because the chapters are quite long. You only get like 4 chapters in this volume, which means that things can be quite sluggish. There is that sort of problem to it, where like some of the chapters just feel like they're kind of dragging things out in almost prototypical fashion of having constant sort of slow grinding of the storylines. But at the same time, I did laugh and I do want to pick up the second volume. So as we've now established, this is kind of the Elliot Page selfish pick. I wanted to hear what you thought of it, Andy.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really an interesting volume because I think if you take kind of the various elements of this series and kind of like compartmentalize each of them, there's not really anything all that interesting here, but this is very much a case of something that's kind of greater than the sum of its parts, because once you kind of bolt everything together, it really just works. Like, it has a real charm to it. It's pretty entertaining, it's pretty amusing. Like, the actual kind of visual style and the way the whole thing is drawn kind of just accentuates that more. And it's a bit of a weird one for me because I'm not kind of like absolutely chomping at the bit and saying like, oh man, I have to read volume 2, but I did really enjoy what I read of it. Like, it is just kind of pure entertainment. Like, I think Mihane's character just works really well. Like, I kind of rolled my eyes to start with at the whole, like, oh, you know, I mean, basically, you know, she looks ugly, but actually she's not as she seems, is kind of like a bit of a played out kind of trope in these things. But it's kind of toyed with in a really enjoyable way here. Like, I mean, like you say, her friend Maria, who is kind of the cute one, is the one who's actually more kind of deserving of the killer demon kind of moniker than Mihane is, because she is the one that just does not give a damn about kind of screwing with people and messing with her friend, like just for her own ends, which is kind of entertaining in itself. But no, like I really enjoyed it. I think that the thing that kind of struck me the most about this volume is that we've kind of got used to it. It's almost become a part of the kind of, especially the romantic comedy manga staple of the kind of like, oh, you know, it has good faces, like, you know, lots of good goofy faces, and this series has a lot of that. And kind of, again, you know, given the main character's entire deal is like, oh, you know, like because of her parentage, you know, she looks meaner than she actually is, like, of course it has a lot of fun with that, but it also just, it kind of extends that to the rest of Mihane's body. Like, she has a real kind of elasticity to her, which is absolutely hilarious, like, in some of its comedy moments. Like, you know, there's a great moment where she's just trying to kind of take back an eraser with her foot that's like landed in the desk next to her, and there's the kind of cutaway shot of her trying to do this, which is just the kind of goofiest thing imaginable. And they also make really good use of kind of her short temper. So, you know, there are multiple points in this volume where she just kind of loses her rag, mostly because, you know, people are kind of dissing on her crush. And she just kind of turns into this sort of Tasmanian devil whirling dervish of
totally.
Like anger and insanity. And those moments are just fantastic because they're just this complete kind of loss of restraint. And it's also, you know, it's kind of posited as one of her charm points, is like she's really passionate about other people. Like, she doesn't really care if people insult her or you know, say bad things behind her back or to her face, but, like, you know, you insult her friends or the people she cares about and she will just lose her shit. And, like, those moments are just all really fantastically done and really well played, kind of both as sort of an important point in terms of, you know, what she really cares about, but also as like as a really good comedy value. And then they just suddenly kind of drop off into this, oh god, what did I do moments at the end of it. And those were probably like my favorite portions of this volume, just both in terms of like how they're depicted, because they have just this fantastic kind of elastic manic energy to them, but they're also just generally very entertaining.
Yeah, totally. I think you mentioned the Tasmanian devil face. That's totally on the money, especially given that it's not just like a one-note thing of, oh, she's angry again. It's like there's one part where it's like a really obvious like comic or manga thing where, you know, she doesn't know whether to be happy or sad, and so her face splits directly down the middle and she ends up one half like ecstatic and one half crying, which looks really terrifying. I think the series pulls that gag more than once, which is also very spooky. But that's some good use, and also it's not just like she's always angry. You know, she's sad. She has you know, she's very, like I say, innocent and very sort of like basically thin-skinned. Like, she's been basically like conditioned to be so thin-skinned about her appearance by just constant people ragging on her for it, and then when she does do the deed of blurting out her feelings, she's just a normal girl. Like, at the end of the day, most of the panels are just her being like, oh man, I hope I didn't fuck that up too hard. And also there's, like you mentioned, like her power and sort of mania. Like, there's the part where she jumps from a second floor window because she's like, oh no, I've embarrassed myself, and she jumps out of a second floor window and makes a perfect landing because you think, oh, she's going to hurt herself and that's going to be the setup for the comedy or the drama. But no, she makes a perfect landing and then wanders off, like, sort of with a flushed face. So it kind of shows, I think her unrelenting sort of innocence is a real benefit in her character, is that, you know, it's not like she's a perfect 180 of being the killer demon, because there are times when she is basically being a demon, but at the same time she's still just a girl. She's just a human who has, you know, a crush. So it kind of it never feels mean in that regard, even when some of the characters are being mean or weird.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you can totally see kind of where the nickname comes from when those moments hit. But I think the other thing that I like about this series is actually kind of the relationship between kind of Mihane and Tomo, because again, there are so many kind of romantic comedies that play on the whole, like, oh, misunderstandings, like, you know, they both have feelings for each other, but, you know, they don't dare say it or whatever. Like, there's a genuine sense of kind of confusion, particularly on Tomo's part, in terms of like how he feels about Mihane. Like, Mihane's pretty dead set on her feelings, although she still has moments where she's like, maybe I've got this all wrong, like maybe I've maybe this crush is completely like, has no good reason to exist, which are also actually kind of quite powerful moments in themselves. But like Tomo's character, like you say, is kind of a bit of a blank slate, but there is a genuine feeling of it's not that he's in love with her, it's not that he hates her. He's very much like, you're interesting. Like, I have a good time when I'm hanging out with you. Like, you make me laugh. You do stuff that other people don't do, and, I find you fascinating, but I'm not sure what that actually means in terms of my interest in you, which, admittedly, by the end of the first volume, I was like, look, just be friends. Like, you can do that. You can just have a platonic friendship and hang out, and it would be cool. There's something kind of refreshing about that it didn't go instantly to the like, oh no, like these two characters are totally both into each other and we're just going to have to just like dance around that for volume after volume. Like there's a genuine sense of uncertainty in that relationship that I like, because that doesn't really tend to happen very often in these kinds of story.
Yeah, I mean, the oscillation on both of their parts is also kind of realistic. I mean, it's very clearly like, very young love, and they're both oscillating wildly in what they feel. But I think, Maria, even though she is a little devil, kind of gives them the best advice in chapter basically 1, saying, look, just talk about it. Like, you can sort it out. You're both adults. You're both like people with words. Talk about this and you'll sort it out. And lo and behold, that does tend to work, and is generally the resolution to most of the stories is, oh, we're still not quite sure where we stand, but let's hang out. And it's like, good, that works well. I mean, as you say, Mihane herself goes back and forth on it, and Toma clearly has either some kind of thing, or he just feels guilty about how this all started out. So I think, if anything, he's the one who kind of needs to do something and then come forward with his answer. But yeah, it's kind of cute to watch them orbit each other, especially because, like, the situations they get into are mundane and self-inflicted, so it gets real stupid real fast. Like the last chapter is just like, oh, let's try baking cupcakes, ha ha ha. Oh wait, crap, this is stupid. So yeah.
Like, I mean, even again, that was a moment where kind of I perhaps rolled my eyes a little bit, and I feel like in another series it wouldn't have played as well. You get the inevitable, like, oh, here's the love rival who's, the actual cute girl who's, oh, isn't she all wonderful and perfect? And then, of course, you kind of get to see the dark underbelly of her where, she's
a bitch.
Vindictive, and yeah, exactly. Like, she's a bitch about the whole thing. And like, even that kind of, it plays quite well kind of in the mix of those other characters. Because again, it's not like, at no point is Tomo like smitten with that whole thing. Like, he never buys into it. It's just like, oh, okay, it's you're just gonna kind of loiter around me, like I have zero interest in you, which again is kind of like refreshing, because any other series it would be this kind of tug of war with Tomo in the middle, whereas he's equally ambivalent to both of them in a romantic sense for the most part. He's just like, I just want to get on with my day. Like, can I not just have some peace here?
Yeah, he's almost like, can I just have some friends here? Like, all my guy friends are a bit jerkish, and all the girlfriends kind of just keep trying to jump me. This is annoying. So yeah, who knows what happens in volume 2 in all that regards. But yeah, I think you put it very well when you said, Andy, that I do feel it's greater than some of its parts. Like, if you dissect it, you find there's not much there. But I just feel like in the telling, it becomes a much more like almost heartfelt story. Like, it's just really like, there's nothing crazy, nothing special about it. But that's kind of one of the reasons I enjoy it, is just because I enjoy watching these characters like orbit each other like goofs. So that's kind of what kept me on the hook, and maybe want to like fling it at you, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where I kind of got to the end of it and realised that I kind of had a smile on my face for the most of the last, half hour or so that I'd been reading it. And that's always a good sign, even when you're maybe not kind of thinking about it in any great depth in the moment, you kind of come away with a pleasant feeling of like, yeah, I like that. I was entertained by it. I kind of liked the characters and kind of, ended up rooting for them. Yeah, everything is well in the world. My day feels a little bit brighter for it.
Yeah, a good mango. But yeah, so unless you had anything else, that's kind of it for Queen Bee. I mean, as mentioned, it's got good faces. It's got plenty of screen tone every now and then. It looks good. Like, it looks fine. It's a good. It does well at putting its characters across, which is all you really need out of this series.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think you're going to read Volume 2 now that it's... I think it's not actually out at the time of recording this, but it's out in like a couple of days or so. So by the time it's actually this episode's released, it will be available.
Oh dear. Andy?
Did you die?
We both died, I think. You were asking me if I was going to pick up Volume 2.
Yeah.
I think I will. I'll check what the price is. I've just moved my entire life cross country, and so my finances are a bit strained. So I will wait and see, which is a very boring answer. But hey, that's the answer I got for you.
Yeah, that is fair.
Yeah, I'm having to put a slight delay on my manga purchasing because I just bought a TV again. Cool. So that's Queen Bee. As mentioned, perhaps more than some of its parts. I'm trying to think of a segue to our next title, but I think it's going to speak for itself no matter what. So, Andy, we've talked about this series before on a previous podcast we hosted, and I remember you talking about this series then, and I bought it, but didn't read it until we recorded this episode. So, whoops. But thankfully, you have set me right. So, please take away and introduce your title and pick for this episode.
Yeah, so my pick for this episode is Opus, which is the last manga penned by Satoshi Kon before he went off and did the anime thing and Perfect Blue, etc., which is something we will kind of end up revisiting at some point, because basically that fact meant that this manga never finished in its entirety, and that's probably something that we'll end up discussing a little bit later on. And so yeah, Opus it's a very Satoshi Kon-esque Satoshi Kon work. Like, if you've watched any of his films, you kind of know what you're getting into with Opus.
But at the same time, it's also kind of wild because it's seeing him unfiltered through a manga being released monthly. Sorry, but yeah, no, continue. You're right. It is very him.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as the series starts, we're kind of introduced to another manga series called Resonance, which is a kind of action thriller with supernatural elements, and we're dropped kind of in medias res into what is basically the penultimate chapter of this manga. Like, the big bad of the series, called The Mask, is kind of seemingly about to emerge victorious over Satoko, who is kind of like the main protagonist of the series. And as things reach their climax, we cut away to the author of this manga, Chikara Nagai, who's kind of agonizing over how to finish this series. Like, he's got an idea in his head of how he wants it to work. His editor's kind of questioning, like, is that really how you want this to end? Because it kind of goes against, a lot of what you set up, and there's this whole back and forth. But in the end, he decides that, he wants to end this series by killing one of the other characters. Like, one of the other characters is going to sacrifice himself to defeat the big bad and, make the world a better place. And, it'll all be fantastic. What a great ending to a story. And
it'll also get the author out of his hole that he's dug himself into.
Exactly. And it's a great ending to a story, unless you are the person that the author has decided to kill sacrificially. And so, by hook or by crook, Lin, the character who has been kind of tagged for demise, finds out that he is going to be killed, and he's going to be sacrificed to end this series. And as you can imagine, he's not so happy about it. And so what kind of transpires is this kind of... is initially the author getting pulled into his own manga, wherein, he kind of finds himself right in the midst of all of the shenanigans going on. In fact, he interrupts the ending to the story himself by kind of literally falling into the scene. And so kind of cue a whole bunch of shenanigans around the world of Resonance as kind of the author and the protagonist he created, Satoko, kind of run around trying to figure out A, what the heck is going on, and B, how to fix things, as it becomes increasingly clear that the character who's supposed to die to make everything right has no intention of doing so and is actively making sure that doesn't happen. At some point, kind of that then gets reversed. We end up with Satoko coming out into the real world, which is a really entertaining kind of little segment as well. And as things get more and more unhinged, the world within Resonance just literally starts to fall apart at the seams. There are fantastic kind of panels where you just, as things change, the panels actually just start to crack and shatter like they're a mirror, and there's some really fantastic visual effects that kind of show the insane stuff that's going on in the world. And kind of, everybody's just running around, just mostly kind of working towards their own ends. But as time goes on, kind of Chikara in particular is kind of torn between, his story and realizing kind of that, he's seen kind of the sentience of the characters that he's created, and, he no longer really has an appetite to kill any of them off. And it is this fantastic kind of romp that, again, as mentioned, like if you've seen anything like Perfect Blue, that kind of bleeding together of fictions and realities and reaching a point where you're not really sure where one begins and the other ends. It is classic Satoshi Kon. It is played fantastically well in terms of, in terms of action, in terms of its little comedy moments, in terms of character. And then it kind of doesn't end because depending on which version you believe, either Satoshi Kon just went off to do Perfect Blue or the magazine got cancelled and so the whole thing got canned. There seem to be kind of two counteracting kind of versions of that.
I think from my reading of it is that he did go off to do Perfect Blue and so found himself delayed, and then by the time he wanted to get back to finishing Opus and with the the recovered final chapter, basically he went back to try and look at it and he found the magazine had been cancelled, and that then so the last chapter of this was basically lifted from Satoshi Kon's files post his passing, and they said, oh, thanks to his estate we can then publish it here, and it then goes another degree beyond meta because some of the jokes and some of the concepts of the series and even the series within a series have now become text. They've boosted up another level so now it's in reality, and Satoshi Kon is drawing himself with the characters bursting back into prime reality inside the comic. And so from what I gather, he started getting busy with Perfect Blue. Then when he finally had time, he was looking at doing it, and then the magazine got cancelled, and it's time to make this weird. So and then it kind of ends because he passed without actually finishing it. I mean, he even makes mention of one of his other unfinished manga which has been released, Seraphim, I believe, and that also kind of just stopped because his career went in a completely different direction, which if anything, the fact it's unfinished is also another Satoshi Kon thing almost, given just where that leaves the work and how the text, the existence of it catches up with the work itself, which again is another thing that is in the work itself and the multiple tiers of its existence, which makes it even wilder, really, when suddenly it's become a self-reinforcing text with its messaging and structures about, where does this buck stop? So I kind of back and forth on the non-ending, because there is a part of it that is naturally frustrating because this isn't kind of the finished form as Satoshi Kon would have it, but at the same time, like you say, it does kind of it weirdly it still works simply because of how kind of meta the whole thing becomes, and the whole the whole premise of it kind of works into the idea that it just kind of ends on a weird cliffhanger and never ends. But I think kind of regardless of how you feel about the ending, the rest of this manga is just absolutely tremendous. It's so enjoyably kind of playful with its whole premise. It is fantastically well drawn from beginning to end. I absolutely kind of love the way everything about it looks, and the back and forth and the narrative from beginning to end. As somebody who really likes all of Kon's kind of animated work, is just absolute catnip to me. It plays with all of his kind of trademark and signature ideas and concepts, but as you say, in a very kind of unfiltered way that is kind of direct from source, and it is incredibly powerful as a result. It is a
fantastic piece of entertainment that I feel like I could just read it again and again and kind of never get bored of it. Like, this is my second time reading through it, and I still just kind of lapped up every page of the thing.
Yeah, I feel like you could read it over and over again and kind of like peel it apart as you go, because like the multiple layers of the series, and like it does so many smart things, as you say. Like, Kon puts so much smart stuff in the series, so like, because you're introduced to the comic inside a comic right from the off, and it does that whole thing that you see in comics where it has the character portraits with their little, like, what their deal is, and it has the whole previously on section, which is really smart because it's using the actual format of the comic within a comic to let you know what is happening and how it's caught up, which is really smart because it's completely effortless and it saves any kind of, as you know, blah blah blah. So it's really effortlessly smart, and like it goes so many directions in terms of the characters just feeling out the parameters of where they are. The one character I didn't like for a good half of the series was Satoko herself, in that she had one thing, which was being hot-headed and a bit aloof and a bit sort of standoffish, and that was kind of it. Like, she wasn't really that important. But then as the series kind of cycles back around again for the second half, she becomes far more important and also far more weird as a character. Her character itself is fine, but her character existence in the overarching storyline as it develops. But yeah, it definitely feels like a Satoshi Kon work in that it kind of revels in the fact that it's not, like, quote unquote just a movie. Like, his movies are fully formed and lovely, but the manga gets to chew over everything at such an extent and such a length. Like, this is a 380-ish page manga, and it just gets to chew over everything constantly. It really reminds me, I mean, like, the ending doesn't bother me so much because I've read works that ask some of the same questions, especially like Kafka and Philip K. Dick, who I have. Like, Philip K. Dick is a problem, and he was not at times a good writer because he was just trying to get a deadline done because he needed money. And some of his endings are complete wet farts. Especially the story that this reminds me the most keenly of is Ubik, which ends on a similar sort of, which level is reality? Will you ever know? Does it matter? Did any of this matter? Well, it did to the characters because they lived it. Shut up. Like, Ubik is one of my favourite stories, and it's like a compact 200 pages I'll read whenever. And it has some of that same ideas in Opus of, like, you know, what do the people think about being in a story? How do they, like, it actually just gets straight to the whole, how do you appraise your creator? Do you think there's anything above them? What is going on? Like, it beats Recreators to the punch by, like, I don't know, what, 20 years plus at this point?
Yeah.
Which I love Recreators, and this is just a way more dense form of it.
Yeah.
Also, the last thing I'll say definitely about the art is, man alive, does it ever give me Katsuhiro Otomo vibes the whole time? Like, it was freaking me out at times. I'm like, did you just, like, kidnap Otomo and make him do the drawing and you do the writing? Like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, you can tell that kind of Kon worked under Otomo very clearly from the art style. Like, you know, in terms of influences, there's not really a lot of argument there in terms of where all of that is coming from.
More people should learn under Otomo because it looks real good.
Yeah, it does. And again, you know, it's so fantastic in the way it uses that art to play with the medium. Like I say, the kind of cracking and shattering panels. Like, there's a fantastic moment where they you know, accidentally, you know, burst through almost into another volume when they shouldn't do, and there's just like this big hole. It also has a lot of fun just kind of with the ideas of creating a world within manga. You know, there are multiple points where they kind of go a little bit off-piste, and suddenly all the buildings just turn two-dimensional. You know, all the characters just turn into very kind of basic constructs that can only, like, blah 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 at people because they aren't fully formed. And, you know, there are lots of great little quips around that of, like, oh yeah, I told my assistant not to bother with this stuff because nobody was ever going to see it. And, you know, it's really enjoyable and playful, the way it kind of it toys with this idea that, you know, you've created this very dense world in terms of, you know, its characters and story, but don't forget it's also very focused around these very particular things, and anything outside of that, either barely exists or doesn't exist at all. And the way it messes with all of that stuff, and even like there are great moments as well. Like there's a moment where Satoko basically just kind of goes from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, which is another fantastic bit of artwork that even just as a standalone piece of art would be phenomenal, but it's almost just a throwaway panel in here where, she just kind of comes to life from flat image to kind of 3-dimensional woman. And there's just so many little moments that, every time I kind of just flick through and look at them, it's just like, this is just awesome.
Yeah, there are times when it almost looks like a movie storyboard. Like there's a part where Chiaki is like caught up in the disintegration of a hallway, and it's really fascinating because at no point does he look any bigger than a flea in the situation. Like he is totally powerless in what is happening to him, and it looks really amazing. And it kind of just like, also the one thing that's really enjoyable about it is it constantly just goes like, there's very few hard cuts in the narrative. Like there's a few parts when like the character thinks they've woken up from a dream, and it always then peels back the curtain to say, no, you just want that as an excuse to get away from what's happening. You are boned. So it never really pulls the camera too far away. You're always like kind of stuck in this weird position where things are very clearly going weird and you are in the middle of it. And like I say, I feel it has 2 arcs where there's like the initial arc where, oh no, my ending has been stolen. And then there's further arcs of, well, what do we do now? And like some of it almost feels like Kon like apologizing for being a layabout manga artist when his character manga artist decides to be a lazy fuck, which is really weird. And then there's like a single panel halfway through where it does pop out to Kon drawing the manga sort of thing, and he even says, oh strange, I don't have that in my notes, weird, why are the characters saying that? And it's like, okay Kon, I see what you're doing there, like you little scamp. And that one panel kind of primed me for the ending chapter, which as the story mentions was like found in his files after his passing. But yeah, it's really fascinating. It's all, as you say, it's complete catnip. Like I'm already a lover of these kind of stories. Like I will devour Philip K. Dick books whole, and it's the same sort of stuff that really was catnip about his movies and all of his work was just this constant pushing. But it's not just pushing for the hell of it. It's pushing to get at something, and this really does have a lot of fascinating, not just ideas, but just like questions to ask and perhaps not answers, because there might not be any. The answer is what you can find out of it. But yeah, there's because as you mentioned, there's an entire part where they go beyond the edge of what the comic should be, and they're just like, well, we're in just made up land now. We'll see where this goes. Oh God! And the storyline is still ongoing. Like the whole thing. I mean, the whole crux of it is that this story resonance has to end at some point because it has to. But there's constant questions about, oh, is it really a happy ending if you just force it upon us? Like, what if it's a dumb ending? Like, how does this story end? How do we actually have free will, or is this just a lie upon itself? And like, what does this mean for something to actually end? So it gets really fascinating in the weeds. And part of it is the fact that I don't think it has any actual answers, because it's Kon just scratching his head going, oh God, what do I do? Like,
yeah. I mean, again, I think that is kind of one of the constants across his career in kind of all of his works is, he doesn't look to wrap stories up with a very obvious bow of like, this is the answer, this is the moral of the story. It's like, I mean, I've seen lectures of him talking about Perfect Blue where, he's very directly asked, like, what does the ending mean? Who is the person we see at the end Mima or not? And he's like, it's, and he
that's
basically
not the
admits,
point.
A, that's not the point, and B, I probably don't actually have the answer to that, because it's what you come away from thinking or feeling at the end of the film. Like that's what is important. It's not even really about what I have deemed to tell you. And this is, I think, very similar when it comes to those big questions. Like it's not seeking to even push you towards an answer. It is just asking the question because asking the question is interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's also wild because Resonance itself, the actual manga within a manga, is itself an interesting like story. Like it's a story about psychic powers and all that, and like it goes so far off the rails like multiple times where just, as you say, like the story starts to crack because just the contradictions that it's forcing upon itself, both intentionally and unintentionally, just get real wild. There's a real like sports almanac moment to this series where everything just goes to the races in a real wild way. But yeah, it's really fascinating even as it stands, like, because even like at the point where it like first falsely ends, it still feels like there's something there to grab onto, which is kind of what's wild about it. But yeah, as I say, like, it took me a while to get used to some of the characters. Like Lin, you know, kind of has his reasons for doing what he's doing. And in Satoko, as I say, like, until she gets fleshed out in the second half, I kind of didn't really give a flying fuck. Whereas, you know, the main character, Nagai, is like, I don't know, I feel like he's very believable in that he is basically like all the worst impulses of the stereotypical manga artist. So kind of works on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that makes kind of Satoko's character work is just like the interplay between her and Nagai, because like there are lots of great exchanges where again Nagai's like, man, why did I write you like this? Like you're actually kind of a pain when I'm like trying to deal with this stuff. And there's a good kind of rapport that builds up between them where they're both kind of being snarky and snippy at each other because they both sort of, I mean, certainly in Nagai's case, like he knows this character really well and he's just like becomes exasperated because like it's all his fault that she's that way. There are just lots of really great interactions there that I really enjoy between those two. But the other thing that I was kind of going to mention, which again I think is a staple of Kon's work, is that he has a lot of trust in the audience to figure things out, you know, in terms of kind of the way the narrative plays out. Because I mean, if you look at kind of the way sort of the story of Resonance is presented to the reader, like you kind of get it all backwards. Like you get the end first and then it kind of slowly rewinds until you get to see the very start of the story. And I think a lot of other authors would be very wary or outright worried about doing things that way because they be worried about, you know, whether the reader's going to be able to join the dots and kind of follow things back and kind of figure out where it's going. Whereas Satoshi Kon, I think partly simply because of his own ability in terms of storytelling, but he also just has that innate confidence that like the audience are smart. They will get this. They will see where this is going. They will be able to make these links for themselves. And it feels supremely confident because of that. It doesn't ever feel the need to stop and kind of explain, like you said, and do the whole, you know, let me fill in the gaps. Here's what's happening here, and this is because X and Y. Like it's very to the point, and it just lets you kind of figure it all out for yourself. Which again, I think this makes it a more enjoyable reading experience because you know you get to kind of exercise your own brain and figure this stuff out rather than having it kind of spoon fed to you.
Yeah, definitely. The sheer confidence that with which it presents itself and puts itself forward, like makes the bigger impression upon you because you feel like you can trust Kon in what he's doing and how he's presenting it. Like there's a force in the storytelling that isn't its sort of mealy mouth, like, you know, sort of twitching its shoes and, you know, awkwardly shuffling about. Like there's no need to backfill because it's going to forge ahead and assume and just let you pick it up. Like, and it's not to say that it's just brazenly doing stuff, like, but you know, it does everything it needs to foreshadow and like show things, and also do them properly. Like there's several parts where the characters are reliving parts of the Resonance manga but with differences because they're fucking it up, and it trusts you to understand that that's what it's playing with, and it does that straight away. Like it just says, "Oh, this. Oh, here's what's happening." Like it gets on with it, which is like. You could quite easily make this manga twice as long and say half as much if you weren't careful. But because it tells you the story and does it forcefully, it works. Which if Satoshi Kon was vacillating on any part of it, it doesn't show. Which is part of why it works for me, at least, is that it is a case of like, this happens. This is the story I am telling. Which again, like going back to Philip K. Dick again, like even if he didn't know what the ending was going to be and had to just fart the ending out, you at least followed him and the journey was completely fully formed, even if the ending made no sense. Or it's just like, what, fuck you, that's an ending, I guess. Like, what? But yeah, and yeah, again, like if you do like this, I recommend highly reading Ubik, which is one of his finest works in my mind, and it does ask some of the same questions about existence, frankly, and your personal place in it. It has a lot of great lines as well, which I'm not going to spoil. But yeah, but all this stuff is like catnip to me for multiple reasons. But yeah, I'm really glad I got to read it because, as I say, like I've spent years running away from it because it's scary. Like it's a scary work. Like I hold Satoshi Kon in a stupid amount of esteem, and like knowing this is his manga and also that it's unfinished and it does all these things that I am really, really invested in makes it a really scary read because it's kind of this thing of like, oh man, if this fucks it up, it's going to fuck me up because I don't want this to be bad, which is lame and stupid on my part, but it's a really fascinating read, and also it moves. Like it covers so much ground in the cover. It's really fascinating in just how the well never runneth dry, I suppose, is the one thing I want to say in this part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of how I come down on it in the end is like, if you're an existing fan of Satoshi Kon's work, like this is absolutely a must read. As you mentioned, it's kind of catnip to all of the stuff that you know he explores in his films, etc., etc. And if you haven't watched any of Kon's stuff before, like this is actually a really good introduction point into kind of, you know, the kind of stuff he does. And you know, it's not a kind of like, oh, this is the formative thing that he kind of got better at over time. Like he kind of had a fully formed vision for the kind of works that he wanted to create, like from here on in. So this is actually a really good kind of starting point of like, hey, this is what you're going to get with this guy's work, and it's absolutely kind of worth digging into and just enjoying whole cloth.
Definitely, yeah, certainly. This is a really good. It's also really strong at like putting forward all the stuff that he considers fascinating, and you know, as I say, like puts to good use in all of his work. But yeah, certainly. It's also like it's one or two bits where it gets gory, and I think even he admits that, oof, I feel bad drawing this as the author insert character. But yeah, it's all really fascinating stuff. And also, if all else fails, Tokyo Godfathers is £8 on Amazon for the Blu-ray. So what the hell? You should buy the second best Christmas film after Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's reaching that time of year where it's time to crack out your copy of Tokyo Godfathers. On which note, I mean, I don't know whether like how long this is going to be on sale at this price, but I mean, I picked this up digitally for like $2.99, which is a ridiculous bargain for what you're getting here.
Yeah, this title is
on sale.
Sorry, Andy. Sorry.
Because yeah, if it's still on sale, like at the time we put this episode out, then you know that is £3 really well spent.
Yeah, Opus is constantly on sale. Like not always on at a reduced price, but I find on Comixology and Amazon it often dips into like the £3 mark, especially on Comixology because frankly it has better discoverability. But yeah, keep your eyes out because it's quite often just apropos and outside of an actual sale just goes down in price. I think the rest of Kon's manga is available physical only. Like I know that Vertical released some of it, and like Seraphim and all that, and like those are weirdly awkward to get a hold of because, from what I gather, they didn't sell that well. Partially because they were even weirder than this manga was. So yeah, but yeah, keep an eye out for Opus, and if you see it on offer or even not on offer, highly recommended. As I say, especially if you like his filmic works, and as Andy said, like if not, this is a really easy on ramp to get on his level, because it's not a movie. Like it has length in mind, so it can drag you into it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like I can't really recommend it any more highly.
Oh, Andy's gone. Andy?
Nope, no, I'm still here. Oh. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Sorry, you vanished for 5 seconds.
But yeah, I always say like I can't really recommend this any more highly.
Yeah, totally, same. As I say, I'm glad I finally read it, even though I should have at least 4 years ago. Oops. But yeah, great stuff. So moving on, and if you want anything further, Andy, we can move on to the end. Yeah,
I think that's me done.
Yeah, I think our internet is starting to collapse, much like the panels in Opus. So what we're talking about next episode. So, well, I think we're both picking the like hot thing of the moment, perhaps. I have picked out Beastars Volume 1, which I believe is coming to anime this season. Is it this season, Andy?
I think it is, yes.
But yeah, this is the story of the drama club dork Legosi, who is a giant grey wolf, who is a gangly ass motherfucker, who is basically just trying to survive school and not get picked on for being a big slavering wolf, in a really weird, like, sort of segmented, anthropomorphized, furry, almost furry style animals as humans thing, where carnivores and herbivores kind of have a very strict line between them because, one of them might eat the other. And it's kind of the hot thing at the moment, I think. Like, it's certainly taken Japan by storm. And we'll be reading volume 1 of that to see if it's up to the praise.
So I've gone a little bit further back in terms of hot, much discussed anime, and I will be reading the first volume of Skullface Bookseller Honda-san, which I remember a lot of people kind of fell in love with the anime adaptation, so I'm kind of curious about the source material on this one.
Yeah, I remember even before the anime, a lot of people on like sort of forums I follow really fell in love with even single pages of it because it's got a really good... I've read a little bit of this, like only a few pages, but it has a very good snappiness to the comedy. So yeah, we'll be reading that. God knows when we'll find time in hell a month to record next, but we'll work that out offline.
We'll figure that
We'll
out.
figure it out. So, moving on to Close Down. So, you can see all the previous episodes of the podcast at Screentone.club. You can also see a list of all our previous reviewed... oh, God. Oh, fuck. Sorry. You can also see a list of all our previously reviewed series linked to from the homepage. So if you want to find out if we've watched or reviewed a certain series, if you have in your heart, we would greatly appreciate a rating or review on your podcatcher feed thing of choice, Apple Podcasts, whatever. That stuff really, really helps with discoverability. Or, tweet about it or message your friends about Screentone.club. You can also view our Twitter at Screentone Club. And we have an email address, which is show@screentone.club if you fancy sending emails. We have 2 unread in my mailbox because, again, I'm busy. So I've just moved my entire life. So, personal plugs. My name is Elliot Page. I am on at Elliot Page. Again, bereft of cat pictures because I'm now 300 miles away from them. Boo-hoo. And Mr. Andy Hanley, where can people find you?
Yes, you can watch my descent into hell in real time at Hannah's1979.
Hell camera. Surely that should be on twitch.tv/Andy Hanley.
Yeah, might have to work on that.
Yeah, who knows. So, from me, Elliot Page, and my lovely co-host, Mr. Andy Hanley, thank you very much, and good night.
Bye, everyone.